Anyway, finally I was able to persuade them. We went. Those poor doctors and lady doctors were waiting for people to come and see that the whole thing was a complete canard and a lie. Again, a function of uninstituted. This talk is not about lamentations, because since the subject is inclusive, I'm telling you the obstacles on the way. As I said, I started with my narration of the heartwarming performance on the very first night in Mumbai at that center. Next morning I read the newspapers, you have this controversy about Shivaji. Now where you have this parallel movements going on. On the one hand, they are building brick by brick. On the other hand, you've got this controversy. And I like to imagine that whenever it is in the arena of Saraswati, things get composed. It is in politics and public life. I shall not denigrate Goddess Lakshmi for any reason, but I am a Saraswati person. I believe anything that in that arena is easier to compose. It's very interesting. People don't know that Indian and European contact with Islam begins on exactly the same date. 711, Tariq ibn Ziyad goes right across North Africa from Morocco, crosses over and takes over the area which he gave his name because his name was Tariq ibn Ziyad, and so he called it Jabal al-Tariq. Jabal in Arabic means rock. Jabal al-Tariq, which the British, what you know as Gibraltar, is Jabal al-Tariq. This was 711. Until 1492, the entire Iberian Peninsula was under what our historians choose to call the Moors. Actually, they were the Arabs. And the Moors, they ruled, they created cities, they created civilization, the most tolerant. I mean, in the same town of Cordoba, you had Muslims and Diogenes and the 3 or 4 Christian, Jewish and Muslim intellectuals in the city square, rather like the Athenian city square, sitting and discussing in discourse. In that one small town of Cordoba, there was something like 50 libraries and 57 baths, hammams. There, then came 1492, Ferdinand and his wife, they financed. 1492 is an interesting date because that is when Columbus set out and the Moors were expelled, and this is another piece of history which I find absolutely fascinating, and I find no one correcting it. There's someone here who was from the Israeli. There you are, my friend. You know, I have never understood that after the Inquisition in Spain, all the Jews, it was not so much on the Muslims as the Jewish people. The Inquisition, they were very harsh and very cruel, and they left and found refuge with the Turks in what was Anatolia. No one even knows about the fact that for 500 years, Arabs ruled Sicily. And Saqaliya, there's a lovely poem by Iqbal about when he goes to Saqaliya, which was Sicily, and of course his poem on Cordoba, Silsila Roz Shab. And in Saqaliya, again, after 500 years of rule, when they leave, again the Jews find space in Turkey. During the Crusades, you find that the armies, wherever they found the Jews en route, were massacred. Wherever. Shylock was not an Arab invention. It was very much Shakespeare's creature called Shylock, because that was the typical, this was their concept of the Jew, looking for his pound of flesh. And during World War II, 6 million were put to death in Europe. And by a trick, a switch of the magnet, the whole thing has been made into a Muslim-Jewish conflict, a territorial dispute. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and the global acquiescence in it, and the intellectual inability to question these things. I mean, either the furniture is not here. If it is there, then the question should be asked. It is quite amazing. The Muslim invasion into India, incursion, the first probe was, of course, Muhammad bin Qasim. It was rather unfortunate. And then, of course, by the 10th century, you had Qutub Minar coming up very rapidly, because obviously there was very little resistance here. But much more important, and you're very right, this Muslim monolith is an absolute poppycock. It is utter nonsense. It doesn't exist. Because the entire, you see, we should know our geography also, in addition to our history. If you look at your map, a very small, thin layer of water separates the western coast, the Kerala coast, from the Arabian Peninsula. You had the contact between Arabia and this fascinating piece of real estate called Kerala, which my Kerala friend called Kerala, is fascinating. They would, on dhows they would come and barter trade for what they called black gold, which was pepper. People don't realize that the wood in Kaaba is teak from Kerala. And I still like to speculate, without any certainty, sir, but I speculate. Look at the clothes that you have to wear when you do when you go for your Hajj. It is exactly the Brahminical edict of one cloth without any stitching on it, unstitched cloth. You have to drape yourself in that when you do. So the commerce between the two was absolute. No one realizes that the first mosque in India is not Jama Masjid. It's Cheruman Perumal Mosque, built when the Prophet was still alive. It's in a place called Cranganore, not far from Cochin. It's still there, where prayers were going on. It is one of the Islamic edicts is that the language of God is Arabic, violated brazenly, blatantly by the Mopillas, because they translated the whole thing into, you had Malayali Arabic, you have a Quran in Malayalam. You see, I mean, Kerala is another exquisite piece of terrain, 789 films a man called Prem Nazir acted in, which is a Guinness Book of Records. And in Malayalam films, 789. Kottakal Haidar Ali, if any Kathakali performance without his name being invoked is not possible, because Kottakal Haidar Ali, and these are all mythological texts that he has to sing. People do not know. This is, you see, ignorance. Ignorance. People do not know that Jagannath, from which the British call the Juggernaut, Lord Jagannath's Yatra begins with songs written by a man called Sal Beg. Sal Beg happened to be as much of a Muslim as Rajiv Gandhi was a Hindu, because the mother was a Muslim. And the best singers, and it is all devoted to Lord Jagannath. And the best singer today, or at least some years ago when I heard him, was Sikandar Alam, of songs dedicated, devoted to Jagannath in Uriya, in Orissa. Everyone knows Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, of course, great man. His grandfather was a scholar of Persian. He himself knew Persian. I'll tell you a story about that. The great reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy's newspaper came out in Persian. Tagore is not only did he write our national anthem, but the national anthem of the neighboring country, Bangladesh, is written by Amar Sonar Bangla, is written by Rabindranath Tagore. Funny thing is that we have somehow in our minds, quite arbitrarily, made him the Indian symbol and made Qazi Nazrul Islam Bangladeshi. Now, there is no reference. Tagore is very secular. Qazi Nazrul Islam cannot write a single poem without the strength of Shiva being there, without Durga, without Kali, without Shakti. All his poems permeate with all that. And Qazi Nazrul Islam was a 5 times a day namaz saying Muslim. What happens is, which we forget, that every religion, and that is why this real estate of India has been fascinating, and we are destroying it. Every religion exudes its own culture, its own way of life, its own rituals, its own way of worship, traditions. Once they come into the public space, they become mine also. The faith is yours. The culture it exudes is mine, is yours, all of ours. So anyone, it is like, I'm amazed, if you go to Italy, Rome, without going to St. Peter's and seeing the Sistine Chapel and the great works of Michelangelo, then you have denied yourself, something. Similarly, the Muslim in this country, the Muslim in this country who has not seen the grandeur of the temple in Tanjore and the sheer scale of it. It's amazing, the scale. It is a huge thing, and it looks this big. Just by Charles will explain to you the manner in which that scale has been maintained. The one in Tanjore. Anyone who has not seen Halibut and Bellu has denied him. Shravan Belagola has denied himself something. Similarly, a Hindu who does not know Ghalib, who does not know Mir Taqi Mir, has denied him something. We have compartmentalized. That's where all this apartheid